what is a healthcare surrogate? You might have heard of a healthcare power of attorney, designation of healthcare surrogate, some version of that. What is it? Why do you need it? And what does it do? So it's a legal document that's going to allow somebody else to make medical decisions on your behalf if you're unable to do that. Commonly, most two common situations that we see, somebody is incapacitated, usually, not always usually, but often because they're in an accident. And so they're just either in a vegetative state, they're undergoing surgery, they're just not there, unable to communicate with the doctor. So that might be situation number one. Or number two, they weren't necessarily in an accident, but now they're suffering from some sort of illness, such as Alzheimer's, dementia, something like that, where they're just not there mentally to make medical decisions on their behalf. So this document would have had to have been created before the accident, before the Alzheimer's dementia started, taking over. So this is pre-planning. This is something, I don't care if you're 20 years old or 80 years old, you need to have it, because we never know if you're going to be in an accident. You're probably not going to have Alzheimer's at age 20, but there's certain, you never know when you might need this. So it's a document that allows somebody to make medical decisions on your behalf. And unfortunately, most doctors, if you go there and you're suffering from one of those diseases, or you're incapacitated, whatever the case may be, they're not going to just automatically communicate with your spouse. If you're the child, you can't just come in and say, oh yeah, this is my mom, she told me I could do it. The doctors, for liability purposes, for a variety of reasons, they're not going to communicate with you, and their hands are going to be tied, which is a very, very difficult situation for a family to be in. So this document, it can be very broad. Usually they're broad, right? Normally these are not like only in this circumstance. Normally they give carte blanche, very broad powers to the person that they name as their healthcare surrogate. So that's what the document is. It gives somebody the power to do it. Remember, it has to be done before. You can't just all of a sudden get this power when it's needed. You can't just prepare this document, which makes sense. If they're incapacitated, how could they sign it? Or if they are suffering Alzheimer's dementia, we can't prepare something for somebody that doesn't know what they're actually doing. So it needs to be done before, all right? Who do you name, right? In most cases, you name your spouse, and then you name a secondary person, right? If you're not married, you might just name somebody that you trust. Now, as a practical matter, you probably don't want to name somebody who's 99 years old, because their mental state might not be very great at that time. They might pass away. So you generally, depending on your age, you're going to choose someone around your age or younger. Again, depending on your age, you might choose somebody older, but they need to be in good health. They need to be in a good mental state. They need to be good physical state. Proximity. If you live in Florida, you probably don't want to name somebody in Alaska, because when the time comes, they're going to, it's going to be very difficult for them to get to Florida and use that power when you need it. So they need to be probably somebody in close proximity to you, ideally in the same state, even better in the same county, same city, something like that. They need to be, basics over the age of 18, of sound mental state and health and all of that. Talk with them. Make sure that they want to do it. Some people don't want that decision. Some people don't want, it's a very uncomfortable thing. They're not comfortable with making difficult decisions like that. So have the conversation before you name somebody. Now, one key distinction is this document can be different from what's called, but could be different from a living will. So a living will is not a will. It's not who gets what of my stuff. It's what I call the pull the plug document. It's what I say, don't keep me on life support anymore, right? You're in a vegetative state. The doctors say that, you're not going to have any sort of meaningful life. The only way you can be kept alive is on life support. Well, you can do two things. You could have your healthcare surrogate say, I want that person to decide for me, right? You give them the power to make that decision for you. Or you could say the living will, you could do a living will where you're making that decision for yourself. It's a document that you've signed, it's been notarized. You say, listen, if that's it, if the doctors determine I'm only going to be kept on life support, pull the plug. I don't want to be kept alive by that. Now, usually my suggestion is if that's the decision, you don't have to make that decision, but if you know that you would not want to be kept alive just like that, do the living will. Don't leave it up to the person you've named as the healthcare surrogate. Here's the reason why. It could be very difficult for that person to make that decision. Let's say that you tell the person, listen, husband, wife, if I'm in that situation, please pull the plug. I don't want to be kept alive like that. Well, and your spouse might agree. Yeah, great. Your kids might agree. Yeah, I get it. We'll do that. But when that time comes, and the doctor's, asking them, you've got the healthcare surrogate. That could be a very, very difficult decision for somebody, and they just might not be able to. They might not be able to say yes just because of how emotionally torn they would be and conflicted they would be. So if that's the decision you want to make, I would generally recommend don't leave it up to the person that you named as the healthcare surrogate. Do a living will, right? So that's the main thing of the healthcare surrogate. Allow somebody to make medical decisions on your behalf if you're incapacitated, you're unable to do so. And it only comes into effect, right, when you need it. Just because you go in for a headache, that person can't come in and say, oh yeah, pull the plug, right? This only comes up when you need it, when the situation is necessary, that you're incapacitated, can't make medical decisions, whatever the case may be. That's what the document is. Think about who you want to choose. And like I said, this is not just for the elderly. This is something that, young people need as well, because life is short. You never know if something's going to happen. So I'd highly encourage that everybody, no matter the age, have a healthcare surrogate named.